Alright, so we're getting to that time of year in the offseason where things start to get a little dead. Most free agents have signed with their teams. Cap space for various teams around the league is drying up. Trades, trade rumors, all of that have now died down a bit. Nothing new on the Zach Lavine trade front either for the Bulls, unless you consider Joe Callie's reporting of Zach and Billy Donovan's relationship being frayed and beyond repair, and that both sides remain interested in getting a deal done. And look, while the Bulls roster is full, they're already near the luxury tax. Most speculate that the Bulls are likely done making moves this offseason, unless, of course, a trade for Zach or Vuce opens up. But it didn't stop me from taking a look at the current still available free agents on the market and assessing some players that might be good options for the Bulls, whether it be via sign and trade, because again, their roster is already full and they're over the cap, so whoever they bring in would need to be executed via a sign and trade, or the only other option would be to waive Onuralp Batum, who is on a non-guaranteed deal, and the Bulls maybe use the vet men to fill out that roster spot. So yes, I'm aware the Bulls don't have the ability to bring in any new players, so I'm sure people are going to see this title and be like, what are you even saying? What free agents? The Bulls cannot sign any more players. Yes, but in this video, I'm going to be talking about it through a sign and trade. So I'm going to talk about some of the free agents that are still on the market that could be intriguing options for the Bulls that fit their new timeline. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, bear in mind, I'm going based on free agents that are available at the time of this recording. Anything can change pretty quickly with a player getting picked up between now and by the time that you're watching this, but as of right now, there are surprisingly still a lot of free agents available, some that I'm shocked still haven't signed a deal. Part of it is because, like I mentioned, we're at this stage where most rosters are set and cap space has dried up. Of course, some of these guys are probably holding out for better deals, even though those deals might not end up coming for them. But let me start with a guy who is probably a little more unrealistic, as I'm pretty sure his current team is wanting to keep him and probably using restricted free agency to their advantage to get him on a cheaper deal, and that's Isaac Okoro. Now, I'm not that much of an Okoro fan, and a fan of his game anyway, but given he really upped his shooting last season, putting up over 39% from three on the highest volume of his career, still fairly low volume, but decent shooting at that clip, he's not going to be an offensive juggernaut. He's never going to be that guy, but he is a tenacious defender. And given the Bulls are kind of void of strong defensive players right now after losing Alex Caruso and gaining a subpar defender in Josh Giddey, getting a guy like Okoro who can up your defense coming off the bench, or perhaps would start in a world where they might trade Zach Lavine, and also a player that fits your timeline. Only 23 years old, hasn't hit his prime yet, and you can take him on as a flyer that could pan out down the road for a cheaper deal. Again, all depends on what the market is for Okoro, which doesn't seem like it's much given he hasn't gotten any offers as a restricted free agent. He obviously hasn't been re-signed by the Cavs yet, who really have to be strategic in what they give him, given they just extended both Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley on max deals. My guess is Okoro will likely just take the qualifying offer from the Cavs and try to play himself into a bigger contract next season, whether it's with the Cavs or a different team. But in the event they maybe do look to try and get some value for him in the form of a sign and trade, I mean, maybe they would entertain taking on Torrey Craig and Javon Carter if the Bulls attach that Portland first round pick to it, maybe even one of those seconds they got in the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade. I don't think the Cavs are going to be that interested in those guys, but for some assets, maybe, especially if they're unsure of Okoro being a part of their future. With Craig, he provides the Cavs some veteran leadership and a strong defender off the bench. My guess is, though, that it's likely going to take more than the combined salaries of Craig and Carter to sign Okoro to a deal that he wants. Between Craig and Carter, that's only about $9 million, which Okoro can get more on the qualifying offer for, unless, of course, he prefers the stability of a longer-term contract that the Bulls can offer him, say, 4 years, $40 million. But yeah, either way, Okoro would be a guy I'd be intrigued by for the Bulls that's still currently available. The next guy I would be on the lookout for is Precious Achiuwa, another guy from the 2020 draft, was a top recruit coming out of high school, just hasn't really panned out in the NBA because of his lack of scoring. But like I was focusing on with Okoro, a pretty pesky defender in the paint, big energy guy, which I like. He can play the 4 or 5, so it gives the Bulls a little more versatility and depth in the front court, which they were lacking last year, especially if Vucevic ends up getting traded at some point this season. They're going to need that. Solid offensive rebounder, Bulls always need that. And the thing about Achiuwa is, you can probably get him for cheap on a short-term deal, which it then becomes a low-risk, high-reward scenario for them. Currently with the Knicks, maybe they would be interested in Torrey Craig in a sign-and-trade deal for Achiuwa. Craig would fit well with Tom Thibodeau and what he likes to see in a player. That's a scenario where you could do a straight swap, as I don't think Achiuwa is going to be getting anything more than the vet minimum at this point. Another guy I would be looking at is Talen Horton-Tucker. Surprised that he hasn't found a home yet or re-signed with the Jazz. I would say if you can get Horton-Tucker on a min deal, that's a steal, even if it's something for slightly more than that. Horton-Tucker gives the Bulls a little more scoring power, although he's a pretty inefficient and streaky shooter, more athleticism, and even though it feels like he's been around the league for a while, he's actually only 23, so he fits from a timeline perspective, hasn't entered his prime yet. I know that there probably isn't much upside when it comes to Talen Horton-Tucker. We kind of know the player that he is right now, but also Chicago native, Simeon High, so it would make for a feel-good story in an otherwise rebuilding season for the Bulls. And then finally, the other guy I would be looking at, and I've talked about him before, is Giddey. I know he's kind of had an up and down career and obviously not a great season for the Spurs last year, but what I like about Giddey is he's been pretty consistent as an outside shooter, which the Bulls absolutely need shooters when they lost to one of their best three-point shooters and also mid-range assassins and gain a non-shooter in Josh Giddey. Obviously, Osman isn't going to move the needle for you much aside from helping space the floor and knocking down some occasional threes. And from a timeline perspective, yeah, doesn't fit all that well. He's now 29, but again, the Bulls are going to need some shooting. This provides you somewhat of a consistent option off the bench that you can likely get on a min deal. I think for most Bulls fans, myself included, is that, I mean, if you're going to go down that route, you might as well just hang on to Batum, who was a solid shooter and is younger, rather than waiving him just to sign Giddey Osman. The other names, some other names that kind of come to mind that sort of intrigue me, but I'm more just unsure of the fit, whether it would be for now or for the long term. Like Lonnie Walker is still a free agent who just hasn't really panned out wherever he's gone, but he's only 25 and could be another instance of taking a flyer on while they're young and on a cheap deal to see how they mesh with this team. Can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe Doug McDermott purely for some shooting, but obviously timeline wise doesn't really make sense. He's 32 years old. So yeah, I don't know. Looking down the rest of this list, I don't really see any guys that make sense for the Bulls based on their current roster construction and their timeline. So these four that I've mentioned are probably it. It's kind of slim pickings right now as it is. And again, most likely the Bulls just keep their roster intact unless we see a Lavine trade, which is now looking more and more unlikely, with Zach likely still being on the roster come opening night, which is just crazy, but that tells you where the market is for him right now. By the way, I've had a lot of people ask me to do another hot takes video. I know it's been a bit, and given things have slowed down, I'll be sure to get one out soon. So feel free to actually leave your hot takes in the comments of this video to be included in the upcoming hot takes video where I react to your wildest Bulls takes. So in the meantime, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.